All right, let's dive right in. Today we're tackling something that quietly, almost invisibly, shapes our daily lives: social media. Now, according to the sources we're digging into, its power isn't some kind of obvious forceful control. Oh no, it's way more subtle than that. And it all starts with the one thing you can never get back: your attention.
This one idea, it's the key to unlocking everything else we're going to talk about. Social media doesn't work by shouting at you to look. It works by creating an experience that's so inviting, so frictionless, that you just hand over your attention willingly. And once it has that, it's got a backstage pass straight into your mind.
So, if it's not using force, how does it all work? Well, it boils down to one incredibly valuable resource: your attention. Just think of it as the front door, the gateway to your thoughts, your feelings, and even your actions. And whoever or whatever controls that gateway, well, they hold a ton of power.
So let's walk through that gateway together. We're about to see how capturing your attention kicks off this incredible chain reaction, one that ultimately decides what you do.
What's so wild is how this lays out such a clear, logical path. This isn't some kind of magic trick. It's a totally predictable process. What you consistently focus on, the stuff flooding your feed, that literally shapes what you think about. And those thoughts, they color your emotions, how you feel. And then finally, how you feel drives what you do. These platforms are engineered meticulously around this exact sequence.
But how on earth do they keep our attention so incredibly well? I mean, it's uncanny, right? The answer is buried deep in our own biology, in mechanisms they've learned to exploit. So let's fire up what our source material calls the addiction engine.
It really starts with the design itself. At the very heart of it all is the infinite feed. There's no end of the page, no natural place to stop and think. It's just this endless river of content, specifically designed to remove any reason you might have to look away.
And that river? It's filled with these little prizes, these quick rewards. A funny video here, a beautiful photo there, a shocking headline. Each one gives you a tiny jolt of stimulation, a little hit.
But it's the novelty of it all that truly gets its hooks in us. See, our brains are hardwired to scan our surroundings for anything new or different. It's an old survival instinct. Social media basically hijacks that instinct by feeding us an endless supply of short, new, novel bits of information, making it feel absolutely essential to just keep scrolling.
And here is a critical distinction we have to make. That little dopamine rush we get from scrolling, that is not the feeling of happiness. It's the feeling of anticipation, the excitement for the next possible reward. And that temporary high, that constant feeling of what's next, that is the very engine of addiction. It keeps us pulling the lever again and again.
This core mechanism actually has a name: variable rewards. And it's the exact same principle that makes slot machines in a casino so unbelievably addictive. You pull the lever, or in this case, you swipe the screen, with no idea what you're going to get. Will it be boring, or will it be amazing? It's that very unpredictability that makes it so hard to stop.
So what's the long-term effect of training our brains this way? Well, we start to change. Our minds get restless, trained to crave constant, non-stop stimulation. And all of a sudden, those quiet moments, a little bit of silence, it starts to feel uncomfortable, even kind of unbearable.
Okay, so this constant need for a buzz, it starts with the biology, but it quickly moves into the psychosocial. Let's take a look at how all this affects our sense of who we are and what the source calls the social mirror.
And this is where the fundamental problem lies. On social media, we are constantly swimming in the highlight reels of other people's lives. We see the success, but not the struggle. We see the happiness, but none of the boredom. But our own life? We're living the full, unedited story, the messy reality. And our brains, well, they can't help but automatically, unconsciously, compare the two.
So what do you think happens when we're constantly comparing our own messy reality to everybody else's curated perfection?
The result is this quiet, gradual, almost sneaky reshaping of our own self-worth. We start to feel like we're falling behind, like we're not as accomplished or that our lives just aren't as exciting, and often we don't even realize why we feel that way.
This whole dynamic creates something the source calls the validation trap. Our own sense of self-worth gets outsourced. It becomes dependent on things like likes and comments. Our moods can literally swing up and down based on that digital feedback. And self-expression? It stops being authentic and it starts to feel like a performance, which makes being truly vulnerable feel way too risky.
Okay,
So we've seen the addictive side and the social pressures. Now let's get into the cognitive stuff, how this actually changes the way we think. In our next section, rewiring your thinking.
This is where the impact gets really profound. These platforms are built to amplify emotional content because, let's face it, outrage keeps us scrolling longer than calm does. Our critical thinking gets weaker because just seeing an idea over and over again can make it feel true, whether it is or not. Our attention spans shrink, trading depth for speed. And the sum of all of this? It creates a distorted view of the world, making it seem way more extreme and hostile than it really is.
This quote right here just nails the biggest consequence of a shortened attention span. Think about it. Important, complex things, like reading a book, learning a skill, having a deep conversation, they start to feel boring. They just can't compete with the rapid-fire stimulation of the scroll.
Now, I know this all sounds pretty grim, but here is the good news. We are not powerless in this. And that brings us to our final and maybe most important section, reclaiming your attention.
So the big question is, what's the solution? Is the only way out to just delete everything and go live in the woods? Is that really the only answer?
Well, according to our source, the answer is no. The key isn't necessarily deletion. It's about a massive shift in your mindset. It's about moving from unconscious use, where we're just passively reacting, driven by impulses and algorithms, to conscious use. That means we are actively choosing when and why we log on. We are purpose-driven. And we're taking back internal control over our own minds.
The most crucial point here is that your mind is like a muscle. Yeah, it's been trained into a state of restlessness, but it can absolutely be trained back into a state of focus. It starts to regain its strength the moment you begin to consciously protect your attention, to treat it like the incredibly valuable resource it truly is.
And that brings us to this final, powerful idea. It's a pretty stark reminder of what's really at stake here. Because in the end, whatever it is that controls your attention doesn't just control what you see on a tiny screen. Eventually, it controls your thoughts, your feelings, and ultimately, the entire direction of your life.